got summer. Are you ready? Are you ready?
Thank you so much, Katie, and good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Based here in beautiful Victoria, British Columbia, where we are boating year-round. So I hope not rubbing it in too much, but yeah, it's a nice, probably 10 degrees out here, and I certainly wish I could be out in Toronto right now, physically at the boat show, but we're certainly making do. Yeah, I like the comment, rub it in, all right. But yeah, no, we've been having a lot of fun out here in Victoria, and I hope everyone's been safe and healthy through these extraordinary times. So like Katie mentioned, my name is Brandon Wright, and I'm doing a presentation on keeping your boat safe and secure. So let's see here, there we go, kicking it right off. So who am I and why am I talking to you? So my background is fairly unique. I graduated from the University of Victoria in 2008 with a degree in electrical engineering. I'm a professional engineer here in the province of British Columbia, and I've had a very unique background in developing remote monitoring equipment. So my background, I worked at a company called FLIR, who some of you may be already familiar with. They actually own Raymarine, but I was in the government systems division where I developed integrated systems to protect the borders of countries, royal palaces, and high valued assets like US Air Force bases. And this is an example of one of the vehicles that I was involved in developing as both a systems engineer and as a program manager. It is a remote monitoring vehicle with a command center built right in. And on top here is a radar and thermal camera that can see in any direction, in 30 kilometers in any direction. Here's an example of it actually deployed, and it was protecting a US or a World Heritage Site at the Qatar-Saudi Arabia border. And as I mentioned before, radar on the top, thermal camera as well, and could see in 30 kilometers in any direction. With this job, my career escalated fairly quickly, and I got to do more perimeter security for places like the Rybovich Superyacht Marina in Fort Lauderdale. This was a $10 million system where it would track any vessel coming in that did not transmit AIS, which was pretty neat. So the super yachts that would be stored here in Fort Lauderdale would have these small vessels, these tenders, and I mean, small vessel could be up to 30 feet for comparing to some of these boats, but they would track every single vessel that would come in just to make sure that they had footage of every single vessel and potentially be able to identify it if anyone tried to break into any of these super yachts. I've had the honor of presenting to the Chief of Staff of Qatar. On the left there is a photo of me receiving an award for successful completion of protecting the border between Qatar and Saudi Arabia. And then on the right is presenting to the retired US Secretary of Defense, William Cohen, where I got to represent FLIR on behalf of the CEO of FLIR at the time on presenting how to protect a border using technology. And so, like I mentioned, my career has been fairly unique, and it's been a lot of fun. I've had clients that have included the CIA, the FBI, and then Homeland Security for the United States, where I was involved in helping develop a remote monitoring equipment to look for drug runners that were running across the border. So my background is very unique in the sense that it is protecting high-valued assets and developing systems that can work in really remote and rugged environments. Now, this all changed on January of 2017. So that's my treasured Catalina 27 that I share with my father. And what you see in the front here, I don't know if you probably see my mouse moving around, but this is actually the mooring ball that she was tied up to earlier that day. And this is a second mooring ball in front of my folks' place. And we can also, it's tough probably to see, but there's a layer of ice on top of the water here too. The boat broke moorage, floated to shore, and never told me at 3 a.m. During quite a large storm. And my father called me in the morning at 3 a.m. and said, son, the boat's on the beach. And so I drove over a small mountain called the Malahat here in Victoria, and got to the boat, got my wetsuit on, And we managed to rescue the boat very, very quickly. And thankfully, there was virtually no damage. But we tied a line to the second mooring ball and then used the winch and just winched the boat off slowly. And it just made the most awful noise you could ever imagine as it was getting ground off the sand and the rocks. But she's safe, she's secure. And I had a very bruised ego because my whole career, as I mentioned, has been protecting assets. And in this case, I couldn't even protect my own asset. So that's when I founded this company, BRNKL Systems, where we develop remote monitoring equipment for boats. And we're not the only company that develops remote monitoring and security equipment, but I'm obviously speaking to you here today, and I'll give you a little background of our company and then provide a whole bunch of different tips that don't involve our system, but give you options for $50 to $150 on ways to also protect your vessel from sinking, from batteries dying, and things like that. So our company, BRNKL Systems, incorporated in July of 2017. So it took me about 7 months to decide that quitting my job while I have a 2-year-old at home was a good idea with a wife who was unemployed at the time. But went all in, and here we are today, almost 4 years later. In 2020, we were announced as Soundings Trade Only Most Innovative Marine Company, alongside Garmin, Brunswick, and Volvo Penta, among a few others. We were also the first ever marine electronics company to exhibit at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas a couple of years ago. And then we've had some nice soft accolades here on the West Coast, being Startup of the Year for a local startup accelerator and small business awards and things like that. And our mission is to reinvent how people check on their boats. We do so by placing hardware on board a vessel, and you can check in remotely from your smartphone, tablet, or computer. And you simply place this device behind your electronics panel or at your helm, depending on a sailboat or a powerboat typically. And you're simply tying in your batteries, your bilge pumps, and other digital inputs and analog inputs into the base of the barnacle and transmitting that data to your smartphone. It has a bunch of built-in sensors as well, and it comes with a camera. Here's an example of the user interface where you can see battery voltage, shore power is connected, bilge pump's currently idle, door is closed, and the green circle is a geofence so that you can get a notification if the boat is taken outside of that geofence, whether on purpose or not. Here's an example of a vessel that's been on a trip where little breadcrumbs are left behind, and you can see the trail of where the boat has been, and you can see the status of the batteries and the door. Now, we have a bunch of built-in sensors into the product as well. We have pitch, heel, and impact monitoring. So if you're a sailor, it's very neat to be able to see how far you've heeled the boat over, perhaps during a race. The pitch and heel also works great if your boat is left at a marina and you want to understand if your boat's beginning to list at the dock due to water ingress. And the impact is great during a storm if you want to understand whether your boat's been jarring against the dock. As well, it has a built-in temperature and humidity sensor so that you can understand if mold is beginning to grow on board your boat, or if a heater has not kicked on and the boat's beginning to get cold or get below zero. It's nice to be able to say below zero talking with a bunch of Canadians, assuming mostly Canadians. And then all the data can be graphed as well too. So you can see trends based on your battery voltages. If you have solar panels, it's very cool to be able to see the battery charging cycles over a period of time. Great for temperature, humidity as well too. And then capturing photographs on board. The system captures photographs based on events. So door opening, door closing, motion being detected, laser sensors being tripped, snapping a photo, sending you a notification, and being able to review that in real time or on demand as well. The system also takes scheduled photographs, and you can request a photo at any time. Now, in a nutshell, everything that I've learned about security and monitoring. Now, this is less salesy. That was the very salesy beginning part, and now the more of the educational piece here. But everything that I've learned in a nutshell is that it's never one thing that will go wrong. It's always a series of things that will go wrong at the same time. And so I'm going to walk through a few different examples of very common problems that people have with their boats when they leave them at marinas, on mooring balls, or anywhere for that matter. And then I'm going to give you a brief example of how a system that was worth many millions, hundreds of millions of dollars was defeated in the Middle East, a system that I designed. And I'm excited to tell you guys that story as well. So first off, protecting your batteries. They're fairly critical for your boat. And the first thing that I do recommend, and I'm not affiliated in any way, shape, or form with this company, but the smart plug. So when I first heard of the smart plug, I thought, man, great. Like maybe it's got a little cell modem in it. Maybe it communicates. Maybe it tells you something about anything. But what makes it smart is actually the little prongs on the side, these little silver, I don't know what they are, like little aluminum or stainless steel prongs that help hold your shore power plug into the shore power receptacle. Now, it seems pretty silly, but most boat fires, most problems with boats actually come from your shore power connection. The number of times that we have boat owners calling us surrounding our product, some of our customers, they say that the biggest thing that's helped them is that Barnacle has told them that their shore power plug has been disconnected and they got the notification. But if you don't have an onboard monitoring system, being able to know that your shore power connection is in there snug and not getting out, it's great to have something like this smart plug to protect your vessel. We've done, in the early days of Barnacle, we went and did a lot of our own installs to support our customers and to also just understand all the different types of boats out there. And the number of smart plugs I ran into certainly has grown. And it's amazing how difficult they are actually to get out once you get them in, because they really don't want to get out, which is what you want. You don't want your shore power disconnecting. The other piece around this is if you have a poor shore power connection, you can get arcing from the actual receptacle or from the outlet to the plug, and that can generate heat, which then generates a fire. So using a smart plug, I believe, gets you some insurance discounts with some providers, and it also ensures that your boat is connected and charging your batteries. Then here's an example of our remote monitoring system. And again, there are other remote monitoring systems out there, but I'm certainly going to be speaking about the one that we develop here called Barnacle. And here's an example of a boater who disconnected their shore power. They received the shore power disconnected alert. They turned on their ignition. They chose to monitor their ignition on board their boat. Then they got the outside of geofence alert when they took their sailboat out on a little trip. And then a couple hours later, they returned back through the geofence. And then later, a couple days later, actually, they got the house low voltage alert. So they never reconnected their shore power connection. And we can see from the graph here, when they were on their trip, when they went back, forgot to plug in, and then their batteries just slowly died out. And then when they got the alert, they went to the boat and plugged in, and then their batteries began charging again. So this is a great example of actually being able to visualize the effect of how quickly a battery can die if you forget to plug in your shore power connection. Usually it takes about 2 days, and this is with minimal electronics powered on while your boat's just sitting stationary at a marina. Next is protecting your assets. So one thing that I would like to mention about protecting your boat from vandalism or thieves is the majority of thieves that we've encountered, or the video footage that we've seen, or the events that we've heard from insurance companies, has been that the thieves don't come from land. They generally come from a small rowboat, a dinghy, and in our case, close to our office, we caught footage of a guy on a canoe paddling into the marina that we're on a floating office right now, by the way. This person canoed past and stole a 54-foot Sea Ray, a very large yacht, and did it via canoe. So it's very common that a thief will come from the water side. It is very uncommon for a thief to come from land. So what you're going to find is the way that your boat is parked, generally you're going to have an outboard motor that's hanging off the stern that's available for someone to start monkeying with. And what I find a lot of people don't realize, especially when I'm going and doing these seminars, if I'm doing it at a yacht club or at a boat show, I'll generally walk around the marina ahead of time and I'll figure out how many outboard motors I could steal and bring into the actual presentation. And if I had a a bit more, if I was a bit more confident, I'd probably try and drag one in just to prove a point. But every single outboard motor does have little arms that you can see here that support a small padlock. Now, I don't know if many people realize that it's one of those things that was very well designed with the outboard motor, but that's normally where you're screwing your outboard motor onto a transom of your dinghy. And they actually have that space to put a lock. So you could just simply lock it up with a $5 padlock and you're set. With the thieves, they want a quick win. They're not going to spend the time unless you've got a really nice, some sort of outboard motor that's really appealing to them, or they find themselves with a lot of time. The next is the outboard motor lock. Again, we're not associated with this company in any way, shape, or form, but I have seen these occasionally, and this completely covers up all access to the pieces that would make it so that you could actually take an outboard motor off the back of a vessel. Those go for about 25 bucks. So I would recommend looking into some sort of locking system for your outboard motor, whether it's here in Canada, in the United States. What my wife, she actually grew up in Trinidad, and it was just assumed that you got to buy a new outboard motor every year because your previous one's going to get stolen. So I don't know what it's like out there anymore, but I know back then they didn't have these types of locking systems available. All right, so this one, we've done, like I mentioned, a lot of installs of our boat security system in the early days, and we still do the odd one here in Victoria. But the amount of times that we say that we're going to go and do an install and the boat owner's not going to be there, they say, oh yeah, no, I've got a key port side in the gunnel or in a cup holder at the starboard side by my little helm there, or in a transom locker. I bet you I could walk around the marina that we're at even right now and probably fire up a couple boats, grab a bit of fishing line or fishing gear from another boat, and just go out for a nice little day on the water. I highly recommend, if you're going to stash a key, I know I can't stop people from stashing keys. I would get one of those lock boxes that you would have for a real estate agent, or some of them are magnetic that you could put underneath your vehicle. I use that when I go surfing. I just lock a key underneath my vehicle and it sticks with a magnet underneath on the bumper and everything. Just have something that locks up, because again, thieves are looking for a quick win, and they know where to look for these keys. I mean, after visiting a few people's boats at a marina, if you're just talking with your pals, you'll learn that the key locations are very, very popular, let's just say. And then we get a lot of questions about how to protect a tender. Now, the easiest way to protect a tender, of course, is just to simply lock it. Again, thieves are looking for a quick win. If you don't have a lock on your tender with a chain or something like that, then it's obviously a very easy target. Now, a lock by itself is great, but a lock that generates noise when you're trying to, when someone's trying to steal it, is even better. So there are bike locks that you can buy that are only 45 bucks Canadian that can generate 110 decibel noise when the lock has been cut. Now, when you're using your key to unlock it, it actually disables the alarm and it does it all properly. But in this case, if someone actually tries to cut the chain and steal your tender, it will just start screaming and howling. So I highly recommend, if you're going to keep your tender on the back of your vessel at a marina, even at mooring ball as well, I would recommend getting an audible lock if that's something that you're concerned about. And you can find them on Amazon. I haven't seen anything advertised at the boat show itself, but yeah, I would recommend just looking on Amazon or going to your local bike shop for that. And then, of course, there's the more advanced solution with a remote monitoring system, where this is an example of, this is actually me with my wife and daughter. We were out shopping pre-COVID a couple of years ago, actually. Strange to think about going shopping now. But I got a notification on my smartwatch to say that a hatch was opened and motion was detected on board my sailboat. I went on board, or I went onto the app and confirmed that, yep, the graph shows that the door had been opened. The pitch and heel monitor, seeing as I've got a 27-foot Catalina, we could see that the heel of the boat was changing when this individual got on board the boat. And then, of course, with the camera, a photograph was taken, and it turned out to just be my dad going and checking on the boat and likely just raiding the beer fridge, trying to get a moment away. But turned out to be a non-issue. But for myself, the sailboat's still in a mooring field, and it is surrounded by some unsavory characters. So knowing that the boat's protected and that we're going to get a notification and generate an alert, we can generate a siren or get flashing lights on board the vessel as well to scare them off. But for now, just knowing that the boat's safe and secure has been great peace of mind. As well, we actually caught a burglar on board a boat in France last year. So this was on board a catamaran where the boat owner was, I believe, in Spain at the time, and then their boat was in France. The one thing that is very important to note about thieves in general, whether it's worried about your boat or your home or whatever in town, is police won't respond to an event if you only have one source of truth. So say a door has opened, the police won't respond to an event where you just have an alert that a door is opened. If you have a photograph, of course, that's a different thing. If you have a door open with a motion event or multiple doors have opened in sequence, police will respond if you have at least two ways of saying that someone is on board. And the thing with the police too is they generally know the people that are causing problems in this area. So in this particular case, it was very interesting to hear feedback was this was the first time that a picture or any sort of footage was captured of this individual on board a boat. The photo, you can see it's cropped to protect some of the assets on board this individual's vessel, but this is an infrared image taken from the Barnacle's camera, and it's not crystal clear, but there's enough defining features of that individual where right away the police were like, we know exactly who this person is, and this is great. We're going to arrest them. And they went ahead and arrested them, and this individual managed to get back all their iPads, all their different electronics that were stolen off of their boat. But until they actually have a photograph of the individual trespassing, it's very hard for the police to actually make an arrest and actually do anything about these individuals. And it may seem frustrating wanting to have security people up and all that, but generally they know who the suspects are. It's just a matter of time before someone actually catches them in the act. All right, so obviously this is a very popular topic for boaters, is keeping your boat afloat. We have come on board a lot of vessels where brand new Jeanneaus, brand new Bayliners, brand new Boston Whalers, all kinds, Grady Whites, where the bilge pumps aren't functioning properly. And with our remote monitoring system, being able to remotely monitor your bilge activity is one of the most requested features. Now, if you're not going to be going for a large remote monitoring system, I highly, highly, highly recommend adding an additional float switch above your existing bilge pumps, and then adding an audible high water alarm on your boat. Some boats come with this already, but the reason that I suggest adding an additional float switch above your bilge pumps is one little side story, I guess, is our director of sales. He was in charge of a fleet of about 15 boats, or no, sorry, 20 boats. And he found that he was buying 15 bilge pumps per year. And this is just a small little fishing fleet here in Victoria so that people could go salmon fishing and things like that. But the bilge pumps will get gummed up with little twigs. They'll get fishing lines stuck in them. Maybe a lure just wiggles its way in, or a hook or something. The bilge pumps will burn themselves out over time. And once that bilge pump burns out, you don't have any way of knowing that the bilge has been running, if you don't have a remote monitoring system on board, of course, until some sort of high water alarm goes off. But most boats don't come with a float switch that's located above the bilge pump. And the reason you want one above the bilge pump is once that bilge pump fails, you're going to have water that rises slightly above the sensor that's built into either your automatic bilge pump or your existing float switch. You'll want to have that secondary float switch that goes off and then triggers an audible alarm like this Johnson pump one, where you can have that noise that will draw the attention of a nearby boater. Now, as like we've been to dozens, hundreds of marinas now, and there's been multiple times where we've actually heard a buzz at the marina, and it's a very distinct noise where for someone like us, we know exactly what that means, that someone's boat's high water alarm is going off, and we'll generally go over there, check it out, let the marina attendants know. And usually we're just poking our head in to see if there's any water in there. If it's fresh water, that's one thing. If it's, I guess, never mind, with Ontario, it's mostly freshwater boating out there. But here in Victoria, if it's salt water that's getting in, you've got a much bigger problem. But yeah, so getting a high water alarm, I would say, is critical. On a larger yacht, larger cruiser like a trawler, or even like on a 30 some odd foot sailboat or 40 or 50 foot sailboat, you're going to have multiple areas that are monitored by bilge pumps. We've seen some vessels that have up to 8 bilge pumps. If you're going to add a high water alarm that actually makes noise, I do not recommend putting it associated with one at the very aft end of your vessel. This is the wet area of your boat typically, especially if it's a boat that's intended to be played on, like fishing, things like that, where you're spraying it down often, you know that the bilge pump's going to run, because you just don't want those nuisance alarms where your buzzer is going off all the time. So I recommend, if you have multiple bilge pumps and you just want to add a high water alarm to an existing bilge pump, you can simply replace your existing switch, your auto manual switch, with one of these high water alarms at, say, a midship bilge or even a more bow bilge, where it should be dry all the time. Usually we've called the bilges up at the bow, the holy shit bilge, where that thing shouldn't be going off. And when it's starting to go off, that means that something's gone wrong on board. So yeah, whenever we're on board a boat, that's the holy shit bilge. And this would be your holy shit float. All right. So if you have a remote monitoring system, of course, you get a little bit more data. Now, for me, being an electrical engineer, data is one of my favorite things of all time. This is an example of a boat owner who lived 4 hours away from their boat. They lived in northern British Columbia, and their boat was located here on Vancouver Island. And it was a 4-hour flight for them to get from point A to point B. And they were starting to receive notifications that their bilge was running frequently. They received a notification that their shore power had been disconnected. And this individual called the marina, and they found out that there was a big storm that had been rolling through Vancouver Island here, and the power had gone out at the marina. So now the marina attendant went down to this individual's boat, because he said that my bilge pump has been running very frequently. And then you can see here at about 2 a.m. that their bilge pump began running for a very long time, which indicated a much more serious problem. And while the shore power was disconnected, the bilge pump was running, the batteries were beginning to die. So with that bilge pump running for well over an hour, that boat owners thought that this is the emergency now. Marina attendants visited the boat. Turned out that the tarp that was on this boat had collapsed and was pouring water down into the boat. And this was a 48-foot Beneteau yacht class sailboat. So beautiful, beautiful boat. It was actually pouring water down its mast and in through where the radar cables and everything were going in. So it was very bizarre, but it was beginning to fill the boat up and get all over the teak and everything. And so this boat owner was very grateful, because within a couple more hours, it's likely that this boat would have really started to take on water and actually began to sink. So this was our first time actually really saving a boat a couple of years ago now, almost to the day, come to think of it, January 23rd, 2019. What's really unique about this system is that you can get alerts based on how many times your bilge pump runs or for how long your bilge pump runs. So it may not be a problem that your bilge pump runs for 5 seconds, but if it runs for 5 seconds over and over and over and over again, that could indicate a much bigger problem. If your bilge pump runs for several minutes at a time, it could mean that there's something stuck in it, or that a tarp has collapsed and was starting to funnel water down onto your teak. So one thing that we also learn is that people think that their bilge doesn't run ever. It is very surprising how frequently a bilge pump will run. I find on my little Catalina, it's maybe a couple times a month, but I generally thought that boat was completely dry, especially where our bilge pump is placed. We have some very large yachts up to 130 feet that are being monitored by BRNKL. The average size is in that 45 to 55 foot range. Those are more yacht type boats. It is amazing how frequently, say, an aft bilge pump runs, especially in an engine room where they've got the little recessed dip in the very back near the transom, how often water makes it into those spaces. So just having that data, understanding how your boat behaves when you're not there is really neat information to have, and also critical if you're trying to get repairs done on board. So the final story before I'll open up for questions is humans will always be a factor in security systems. So this is a story about the blue jumpsuit. And this one was at a military base in the Middle East. This is back when I worked at FLIR, of course, and we developed a system that consisted of radars, thermal cameras, perimeter fence security. So this perimeter fence had a fiber optic cable that was weaved through all the chain link fence, and it would go off and you'd know basically to the centimeter along this fence line, if someone grabbed it and shook it or was trying to climb it, you'd get a notification back to a command and control center to say, at this exact location, there's someone trying to climb this fence. And all the cameras would swing over, zoom in, and allow you to identify day or night what's actually going on. So one thing we found that was very common, it's even common now with our boat security system, is during the commissioning or the testing of the system, they would do surprise tests. So someone would open a door, or someone would try and run across an area and see if they're tracked. People would simulate different events, and they wouldn't tell us, the security integrator, that it was happening. So I remember the first time it ever happened, I think I was in my early 20s, and it was like, oh man, there's something happening, what's going on? And they're like, oh yeah, let's see how this goes, and blah, blah, blah. So there was an event in the Middle East at this base that's a very, very notable base that presidents visit, that it's very popular location that you might see on the news periodically. There was an individual coming in towards the base in a blue jumpsuit. We thought, oh man, okay, here we go. Here's another test coming up, and we're going to see how everyone reacts. So we're going to see the soldiers, how they behave, how they use the system, how they interact. And so they walked over, and I was like, hey, all right, guys, like, here we go. There's something happening. And the guys and girls that were working in there, they were like, oh yeah, okay. Yep, no, blue jumpsuit. It's all good. It's just a worker. Like, okay, like that's bizarre. And we zoomed in on the camera and everything, and we saw that this individual was carrying 2 ladders. And we thought, okay, blue jumpsuit, 2 ladders, like probably a worker. They got closer and closer to the fence. It just seemed more and more bizarre. They took the first ladder, put it up against the fence. And by the way, a fence, like razor wire, the whole, like, just imagine what you'd have for a big military base in the middle of the desert. Put the first ladder against the fence, started climbing up the ladder. And that's when I'm starting to really wave people over, like, this person's climbing up the fence. Pulled the second ladder up, put it on top of the razor wire, stepped onto the second ladder, pulled the first ladder up, put it over, climbed over, pulled the ladder that was on top over, completely inside the military base. Blue jumpsuit. It was unbelievable. And so I brought it up with everyone, like, this is not the behavior that this is not what you should be doing with the security system. You shouldn't just be ignoring based off of this. And of course they did respond. Once they saw the individual got inside, they questioned the individual, and sure enough, it was just a worker. It was an individual that didn't want to go through the security gates. They have to show their passport, they have to show their work permit, the whole meal deal. And they must have had to go and do some work outside of the perimeter, but they just didn't want the hassle of having to go through all the different systems to get in. So they chose to take the path of least resistance and just climb over the fence. But the moral of this story is you could add all this technology, you could add all these different interfaces to help protect your boat, help protect your home, help protect your car. But if you don't use them properly, they're useless. And this is hundreds of millions of dollars that I felt went up in smoke. Yeah, I felt fairly disheartened by that system, but we know that it's still in place to date. I'm certain that you can't wear a blue jumpsuit and break into these military bases anymore, but but that was one instance where it was pretty disappointing to see that that's how you could defeat a multi-million-dollar system. So, whoops, oh, I just killed all that. Perfect. All I was going to post up was the last slide here. Let's see, there we go. So yeah, that's the presentation. We're Barnacle, based here in Victoria, British Columbia. We manufacture our product in Vancouver. We support the Canadian Coast Guard. We're protecting over a dozen of their vessels. We're on 75% of Transport Canada's Harbor Patrol fleet. We've just got our first contract with the Royal Canadian Navy, protecting search and rescue boats here shortly, and ambulance boats. So it's been a really interesting ride over the past few years. We're 9 people strong here in Victoria, primarily engineers and a couple salespeople. If you do want to visit our booth at the Toronto Boat Show, that'd be great. It's just Barnacle, BRNKL. We had to be fairly unique in our name, just being a startup and having fun with it. And if you'd like to schedule a demo with us, we found that actually interacting with us on our website has been a bit easier. We have barnacle.io/TIBS2021. I'll just show you here that on our website, we do have a little chat window. So if you'd like to chat with anyone on our team, you can do so. And if you'd like to schedule a demo where we can help you design a system for your boat, you can schedule a 15-minute demo where you can tell us what type of boat you have. And we've done hundreds of installs now, and we've sold to vessels in over 30 countries. We have a good idea of what you need in order to very well protect your vessel. So I'm happy to take some questions now.
Awesome. Thank you, Brandon, for such a great presentation. We do have quite a few questions here, so we'll launch right in.
Great.
The first one, it is in regards to this particular person says that they disabled their alerts after they were receiving quite a few from the rocking motion of the boat, and it was eating up a lot of data. So they would only look at recordings later on to see what was going on. And the other issue they found was available Wi-Fi if you were not wired to the internet. Do you have any thoughts on those?
Yeah, absolutely. So our product is all cellular based. So with our product in particular, it's a global cellular plan. So there's no reliance on third-party systems. With our partnership, we were with a partner called Sierra Wireless. That's a broker. So if you cross a border, if you go into a different country, if you are worried about overages, we don't have any data issues in that regard, since we use one big pool of data. It's the same SIM card that's used on boats in the Bahamas, in Paris, or in France, sorry, in the United Arab Emirates and in Canada. So overages, things like that are a non-issue with the Barnacle system. Curious what system you're using that might have concerns about overages and data and things like that. But yeah, with our system, there's no issues around that.
And are you able to give us some kind of idea of the cost of a boat monitoring system, please?
Yeah, absolutely. You know what, that I would normally have had that on the last slide as well too. Let me just share my screen. Screen 2, share. So the core product is $1,245. That includes the battery monitoring, the bilge monitoring. You can add a shore power monitor for $60. Let me see here. It's always important to have a very verbose appendix on a presentation. So here we go here. So Barnacle with the camera is $1,245. You can add additional cameras if you add the Barnacle Mate, which supports wireless sensors. So it really depends on the size of the boat, but if I was to ballpark for, say, a 30 some odd foot sailboat, you're likely going to be okay with a $1,245 system plus a couple of accessories. Might put you up to $1,400. And then our subscription for the cellular is $300 per year, where the first year is half price. And you're going to be looking at between a 4-hour and 6-hour install generally, whether it's you yourself as a DIY install or a marine electrician. The system is designed to be done by yourself. We have a lot of different installation videos. We've spent a lot of money on our installation manual, but on the TIBS website, we actually show our boat security installation video, how you can install it. and how you can install the wireless sensors on board your vessel. This is an example on a powerboat, and this is an example on a sailboat here. But yeah, generally, budget yourself between $1,500 and $2,200, depending on how many things you'd like to monitor and how many additional security sensors that you'd like wireless door sensors, wireless motion sensors, things like that.
And you touched on installation a bit. There's a question here about the cost of a typical installation as well.
Yeah. So we generally find that marine electricians will range from about $80 to $120 per hour. So if you wanted to budget on the worst case scenario, say 6 hours at $120 an hour, you might be in that $720 range for an install. But like I said, generally that's on the very high end for the expensive and for a long install. We generally see installs of around 4 hours for the system.
Excellent. And just to confirm, there's a question here that also asks, does Barnacle do the installs or sub it out? And it sounds like,
yeah, it depends. If you're in Victoria, we always love to meet the boater, and we can do the install as well too. We do charge $120 an hour for our install, since we don't generally do them. In Toronto, we do have partners out there. We've got quite a few units that have been deployed out in Ontario, as a matter of fact. We do have a very strong partnership with Western Marine and Transat Marine, and they're, I believe they have 100 and some odd dealers with, I think it's 140 dealers across Canada. So our system, we generally work with the marine electrician prior to doing the install if it's their first time. And we're always available to support via video call, via phone call, and we can support online in any way, shape, or form to make sure the installation is successful. Like I mentioned, we're mostly engineers in the company, so you're not just talking to folks that think they know what they're doing. We know very well how boat systems are designed, and we can very happily support an install, whether it's a DIY or a professional one remotely.
Fantastic. And there's a question here about wiring. How are they wired, to the negative or the positive wire on each device? And how complicated is it to run wiring through the boat to connect to your device? Yeah,
so this, I was even surprised when I first started the business. So depending on, it doesn't seem to matter whether it's a sailboat or a powerboat, you're going to have one main panel that has all your Bilge switches, all your existing battery monitoring. So it might be an existing voltmeter, a Victron, or something like that. Excuse me. All you're going to do is you're going to wire to the back of your existing Bilge switches onto the manual line. So when your Bilge is running just idle, when it's just sitting there, your manual line is going to be low, so 0 volts. When your Bilge pump runs or you manually cycle it, that line goes to 12 volts. So all we're doing is we're just monitoring that 12 volt line. With your battery monitoring, we're typically just drawing off the back of an existing voltmeter. So if you've got a battery monitoring device, you can just tie into the back of that and run the wires maybe 2 or 3 feet. Since everything's generally in one place, just like what you can see on my screen here, this is an example on the back of an aluminum boat. There's generally one location where everything lives. So the length of wire that we're running is maybe 5 feet, maybe 8 feet for some of the longer runs. On some boats, like a bow rider, you will likely see that your engine batteries or your starter or house batteries are back at the transom. Usually you have to run a wire through a gunnel along the port or starboard side where there's an existing wire run. And it's just going to be a small 18 gauge wire that connects into the barnacle. Now, if you're going to use a wired door sensor or a wired security sensor, you just have to run the wire for that. And generally we're looking for a 0 to 12 volt jump. So just when it's active, it goes to 12 volts. We also have digital inputs that are switching ground. So if it's a door sensor, it can be connected to ground and just opening and closing, going from a floating signal to a actually connected to ground signal. All this is in our user manual. It may sound confusing while I'm explaining it as an electrical engineer, but we've spent a lot of time and effort on developing an instruction manual and videos that make it very easy for a consumer to do their own install.
Fantastic. And questions here about power. So do any of your clients maintain monitoring while their boat is on the hard? And how is this accomplished given there is usually no power?
Yeah, so our system draws 60 milliamps of power in its normal state, which is about the same as a small watch. So the system itself does not generally, it's never been the cause of any issues on board a vessel. If there is concern, you can always buy a little 30-watt solar panel from Canadian Tire and just make sure that things are getting topped up. But otherwise, it's such a low power device that it's just a non-issue. We've got a lot of boats on the hard all over the world that use Barnacle. We've had boats on the hard during hurricane season in Florida that where they just have no shore power connected and all that. And they actually got the fascinating information where they could see the barometric pressure drop with the onboard sensor on the Barnacle and actually see what was going on with the actual storm without being anywhere near their boat for that.
Excellent. And can you adjust the sensitivity of the various sensors or data relating to when you get alarms?
Absolutely, yeah. So with my background in security, the number one thing that destroys the confidence in a remote monitoring device is false alarms. So everything is configurable. We go through that in our installation manuals, and we're always available by phone or video call to help you optimize your system. There's different settings for door sensors where they have to be open for a certain amount of time before it generates an alert. So if you've got a door that you know is a little bit shaky, we can make it so that it has to be open for more than 5 seconds before you actually generate an alert. Same goes for a laser sensor or any other type of sensor as well. Bilge pump, shore power, things like that. You can set it as a configurable amount of time before it actually generates a true alert.
And do you have any auxiliary capabilities like tank levels?
Yeah, so with our new Barnacle Mate product, we're going to be adding the NEMEA 2000 connectivity, and that will be able to grab all the tank levels, engine RPMs, engine run times. Now that's a feature that's coming out in the next few months, and it's a feature that's going to be added to the Barnacle Mate product. So you buy the Barnacle Mate now, you'll be adding a small accessory afterwards that adds that capability.
And what about out of cell range offshore?
Yeah, oh, I love it. So we're actually about a month away from having satellite capability here. We are going to be supporting the Iridium rock block antennas. So it will automatically fail over to the Iridium satellite connection, and you can configure whether you want to just push GPS data or sensor data as well. Now, it's been very fascinating with the type of cellular connectivity that we use. You don't need much cell reception at all. And it's been very surprising, especially for folks here on the West Coast where they're going up into some of the remote islands, where they actually have cell reception, where their phones don't work properly, but their Barnacle system still functions fully. When you are out of cell reception though, since your phone isn't operating properly, you're not going to get those alerts to your phone simply because your phone isn't going to have that connectivity. But the Barnacle system, from a security perspective, you can still disarm the system with key fobs, with keypads where you punch in codes, and the system will still generate alarms like sirens if someone tries to break into your boat while you're outside of cell reception.
And just to circle back to the question about auxiliary capabilities, will that feature be more expensive?
So it'll be $125 to probably $200 accessory that's an add-on to the Barnacle. So we're trying to build a suite of sensors that support both small and larger boats. But yeah, you'll be adding on another small accessory to that.
And any idea if there are remote security management systems available in the public sector that utilize small drone technology for more active detection and monitoring?
Yeah, not for boats, but Ring actually just came out with a little drone. I can't remember what it's called. We'd have to check the ring.com website, but it's one for inside of your house, I believe, where it does a search, just a scan through your house. And I believe that if a door is opened, the drone remembers sort of the flight plan of your home. Imagine being a burglar, opening a door and then hearing the buzz of a drone picking up and then starting to come towards you, man, I'd be out of there. So that's the only one that I'm aware of right now is Ring. I can't remember what they're calling it though. I heard a podcast with the founder of Ring talking about it. It just sounded fascinating.
And another question here. We have bilge pumps running at 24 and 32 VDC. Will your system work with these voltages?
Yep, no problem at all. Absolutely.
Awesome. And are you able to share your location / routes in real time?
Yep, absolutely. So let's see here. I've got my screen up and let's see. This is actually my sailboat on the mooring ball. I never learned my lesson, by the way, about the mooring ball. Still there, but I've got the geofence around my boat. It was funny enough, yesterday we were doing a demo to an individual and my father was on the boat again and he'd taken it for a joyride. So we could actually see the historical data. And right now it's about 3:52 here in Victoria. The last update was at 3:47, so 5 minutes ago. It put in another GPS point here on the app. We do have the web interface, as you can see here. We can see that my house battery is actually getting a little bit low. The starter battery is on the solar panel, so it's getting a charge right now. Bilge is idle, doors closed. Pitch, heel, and impact is all about 0, so it's a pretty calm day. It's pretty wild, actually, being able to see, like, let's see here. Oh, I'm sure my internet's actually going horrendously slow right now, but here's, you can tell when some wind was picking up over the past 12 hours or so. Just the boat moving around a little bit. But all the data is in real time, and then you can also see all the historical data as well. And then, yeah, my internet might be a little bit too slow with doing the screen share and the video, but we can actually see some shots of my old man breaking into the boat yesterday. He's always one to put up. He always knows that we use the sailboat for demos, so he's always putting up little pirate hats and things like that on there. I try and tell him not to, but he'll never listen.
And what is the typical cost for a setup for a 42-foot powerboat?
For a 42-foot powerboat, I would say that you'd be looking, I would budget for under $2,500 for sure, including install. If you want to add more expensive sensors like laser sensors across your aft deck, those are $200 a pop. So it really depends. We'd be happy to set up a demo to figure out exactly what your needs are. But if you want a basic monitoring system where it's just batteries, bilge, cabin temperature with no security, you can do the basic Barnacle system for $1,245. And that's going to get you monitoring every single system on board your boat without as many security features.
And if your boat is stored on the trailer in a fenced yard at a marina that's padlocked, would you recommend, what would you recommend for securing? The boat is a borrower with a stern drive.
Okay, yeah. So if the primary concern is the boat actually disappearing and being moved, I mean, if you're not interested in a full verbose, like complete comprehensive system, you could just go with a spot trace and have GPS monitoring. Those go for about $150, I believe, and I think you're in it for maybe $20 a month for the satellite subscription. But that's going to get you the geofence alert if your boat is stolen. If you're looking for a comprehensive solution where if someone jumps on board your boat, or if you're worried about an expensive battery bank, you could add a Barnacle system on there as well too, or in place of a spot trace. The one thing that I didn't touch on yet is, which I will now, is with a boat security system like Barnacle, we have a lot of partnerships with insurance companies. So on, say, a 45-foot boat or a 42-foot powerboat, and all the way down smaller, if you have a boat monitoring system, you can get up to 15% off your premium through partners like the Lloyd's of London, Underwriter. We've been working with Intact, M&D Insurance, Dolphin Insurance. Quite a few different insurance providers are partners of ours where you mentioned that you have a Barnacle on board, you get an immediate discount. We've found that if your boat's over 65 feet, you've got a free Barnacle. It pays for itself and it actually becomes a revenue stream for you where you've saved more in insurance than the cost of the actual product. So it also leads us to believe that we need to have a more expensive version of the product for bigger boats.
And can you customize the views on your computer or phone?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, actually, when it comes to moving the tiles, you cannot move the tiles yet. That's certainly a user experience piece that we will be doing. You can't do that at this time. Right now, it's really just changing the size. If you've got multiple boats, you can see a fleet view of the status of all the vessels. But right now, it is just this one view, but you will be able to move the tiles around in the future.
We are summer. Are you ready? The Toronto Boat Show.